Great to see King Charles III back in action after his cancer treatment. But did he really want this? In his first week back, he unveiled the first official portrait of himself since the coronation last year. Now, this painting by Jonathan Yeo, I mean, you might call it abstract, I don't know what you might want to call it. It was unveiled by His Majesty at Buckingham Palace earlier this week, and you can see it here, showing the King in the uniform of the Welsh Guards against that red backdrop. I mean, just look at this. What's going on? So far, the painting has received, well, let's call it varied reactions from the public. And I'll be interested in your thoughts. gbnews.com, your say. But I'm delighted to be joined now by the author and historian, Alexander Larman, to get his thoughts and sort of the history behind this. Alexander, I mean, all sorts of controversy from this picture. What's your sort of takeaway? First of all, do you like it as a picture? And then what's the sort of historical context of what we now see?
Hi, Richard. I think the first thing to say is that it's very typical of the artist's work. I mean, if you've seen anything by Jonathan Yeo, you'll know that he likes, essentially, the best way of describing it is big colours and very famous people. So when I first saw it, I thought it's a very typical Jonathan Yeo portrait, but it's a very bilious shade of red. I mean, there's no two ways of describing it apart from the fact that it's not the kind of thing that I'd want to have on my wall. And I mean, it's 8 feet tall and it's very striking. But what I've been surprised by is that the initial reaction to it was that people who are, shall we say, more conservative, more right-wing, have liked it very much, whereas people on the left, perhaps for more Republican-facing elements, have been rather dismissive. I mean,
that's interesting. You put a sort of a political context to it. I mean, that's very interesting.
Well, what was interesting is that the Guardian's arts critic gave it 1 star. And it was a very funny review because, first of all, he said how much he liked Jonathan Yeo, the artist, personally, and then he laid into it. So I thought, this isn't nice. What on earth does he say about people he doesn't like?
I love the description of it, which said that the head, the portrayal of the head of King Charles III would earn a knighthood. His hands would earn an MBE, but for the artist, for the rest of it, he should be taken to the Tower and presented for execution. A bit harsh, but I mean, the rest of it it's just a sort of red mess, isn't it?
Well, I think what's quite interesting is that the facial representation of Charles shows his kindness and shows his wisdom. And if I was him, I'd be very happy about that. But the question that I'd be asking if I was His Majesty was, why is it so red? Because what you see about red is it's a very striking colour. And if you're a kind of abstract artist, you can do immensely interesting things with it. But Yeo is not an abstract artist. Because obviously, at the end of the day, it's a representational portrait, and it's a commissioned portrait of the king. Now, I mean, obviously, we've had other very well-known artists who have painted the royal family. I mean, famously, Lucian Freud painted Elizabeth II, and that was a very de-glamorized, very controversial portrait, and people still talk about that 20 years on, although, again, The Guardian called it the best royal portrait in 150 years, so make of that what you will.
Do you think here, Alexander, Jonathan Yeo sort of imposed his own view of King Charles III within this picture?
Well, I think that the artistic flourish he's had is that we can see there's the butterfly just above the king's shoulder. Now, of course, there's lots of interpretations as to what the butterfly could mean. I mean, the artist has said that he thought it was always signifying his shift from being Prince of Wales to being king, which is fine. I mean, if that's what you want to say. But I think you could also say, is it some sort of suggestion about Charles's illness? Is it some sort of reference to his spirits? I mean, that seems exceptionally unlikely. But there's lots of ways in which you can interpret that. Of course, the trouble is, as soon as you put in any symbol into a painting like this, which is not completely naturalistic, you're going to have people who look at it and say, well, why the butterfly? Why the...
I quite like the butterfly, to be honest, Alexander, but I just thought the rest of it was a bit of a mess.